Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at our virtual town hall. My name is Jade Maxwell Rodriguez, and I will be your moderator this afternoon. As this town hall is virtual and we are not all gathered in the same space, I recognize that this land acknowledgement might not be for the territory that you are currently on. We ask that if this is the case, you take the responsibility to acknowledge the traditional territory you are on and the current treaty holders. As a member of the York University community, I recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tkaronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject to the Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peacefully share and care for the Great Lake regions. I would now like to review a few housekeeping items before we get started. As we have done in previous town halls, we will be conducting a one-question poll for those individuals who are participating by Zoom. If we could ask everyone who is able to complete the poll, that should now be visible on your screen, just so we can get a sense of who is participating in the town hall today. I'd like to note that we also have ASL interpretation and closed captioning to support our participants at the session this afternoon. I'm pleased that we are also joined by a number of students from Glendon's Master's program in conference interpreting, who will be using today's session as an experiential education opportunity. Today, the students will be providing interpretation in French, Spanish, Mandarin, and Russian. If you would like to listen to the interpretation, please click on the interpretation button and select the language you are interested in. This event is also being recorded and will be made available after the event on the website conversations.info.yorku.ca. I would like to thank everybody who has completed a survey following previous virtual town halls. The feedback that we have received has been extremely helpful and has informed how we can improve this experience for our participants. I'd also like to thank everyone who submitted a question in advance, and we've received a lot of those today. I'll be asking those questions throughout today's session, and where possible, when there are questions that are of a similar nature, I will try and bundle them together to allow us to address as many questions as possible. We will also be taking questions live during the town hall. I will explain how this is done after President Lenton's presentation. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to President Lenton to get us started.
Thank you very much, Jade. Good afternoon, everyone. Bienvenue à tous. Bonjour. I'm really pleased and want to thank all of you who have made the time to join us today. I'm sure that most of you by now are aware that earlier this month, we announced that we are planning for a safe return to on-campus activities for the fall 2021 term. Our plans are centered on bringing classes and co-curricular opportunities back onto our campuses as much as possible, while continuing to provide access to high-quality remote learning options. Classes that are held on our campuses will be delivered in small group formats that maximize interactive learning while prioritizing the health and safety of our students, course instructors, staff, faculty. The gradual return to campuses for our staff and managers is also expected to take place beginning in late summer in order to be prepared for early fall. And yesterday, Vice President of Equity, People and Culture, Sheila Cote-Meek, shared the details of our new transitional remote work policy, which aims to create greater flexibility for our staff. The new policy will provide all eligible employees with an opportunity to engage with their managers about the return to campus plans and their options for ongoing remote work arrangements. I would also like to offer some reassurance to any staff who may be asked or required to return to campus before September. We appreciate that individuals may need time to make arrangements to ensure a smooth transition, and we are committed to providing adequate notice. Right now, we've indicated offering no less than 2 weeks notice. We're just taking a look at that right now to make sure that that's adequate time for our staff. Last week, we also announced that we're going to be instituting a special York Wellness Day on Friday, July 2nd, to provide an extended 4-day long weekend for eligible staff. I recognize that not all staff will be able to take this extra day off, given the required nature of their role with the university. For those who are required to work, compensation will be arranged following our collective agreements or terms and conditions of employment for non-unionized staff. I know that many of you, understandably, have questions still about what the return to our campuses is going to look like and how the transition might affect you. I'm going to try to leave as much time as possible for these questions today because we really want to try to get to as many of them as we can. But before we open things up, I do want to acknowledge that while we will be able to answer or at least provide clarity on many of the questions, There will likely be some that we simply are not able yet to provide full details on. This is not because of any lack of effort or planning, but because we are midway through this effort and we continue to respond to an evolving pandemic. Although I'm sure we all wish otherwise, no one can offer complete certainty on what the future will hold. We are working in a context of many unknowns. How quickly will the variants of concern affect us and how? When will everyone who wants and who is able to have the opportunity to be fully vaccinated? When will we reach herd immunity? What about those who can't be vaccinated? And what will be the public health regulations in the summer, early fall, and winter? Unfortunately, we do not have the luxury to wait for more clarity on these and other questions. While public health guidance can change quickly from one moment to the next, the planning cycle for a large university like York is less nimble. We recognize that students need information now on how their courses are going to be delivered, and that many students will not be able to pivot quickly later on due to travel restrictions, health concerns, or other obligations. Our faculty and course instructors also need clarity. And so we have chosen a plan that we think is appropriate for our community, one that continues to call for physical distancing, mask wearing, and a managed approach to the amount of on-campus activity allowed, as balanced across teaching, research, services, and amenities. If the public health regulations loosen, we will have the ability potentially to expand certain on-campus activities to offer more co-curricular events, more research, more services, and amenities. But if they tighten, we will also have contingency plans in place so that we can contribute, so that we can continue to offer the high quality education that our students have become accustomed to, no matter what the format. One thing I can assure you of is that our return to our campuses planning, it draws a firm line in the sand around the health and safety of our community members. All of our planning principles and our efforts align with and reinforce public health regulations. And the gradual reopening of our campuses will only occur within the context of the necessary public health regulations. We look forward very much to welcoming all community members back onto our campuses this fall and to providing a safe and vibrant on-campus experience for our students, staff, faculty, and course instructors. We will continue to keep you updated on our planning over the coming weeks and months with more details on what you can expect for the fall and how we are continuing to keep our campuses safe. In the meantime, I would like to open things up now for the panel and me for us to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much. Merci, miigwech.
Thank you very much, President Lenton. I'd now like to invite the rest of the panel to join us. So I'd like to call on Vice President Lisa Phillips, Vice President Carol McCauley, Vice President Amir Asif, Vice President Jeff O'Hagan, Vice-Provost Lucy Fromwitz, and AVP Catherine Michelangelo. If you have any questions for the panel, you can post questions using the Q&A function in Zoom at the bottom of your screens. For those of you who are watching by YouTube, you can send us an email at conversations@yorku.ca. Our moderating team will be monitoring the Q&A and choosing several questions that can be asked live during the town hall. If your question is selected, you will be notified and your microphone will be turned on so you can ask the question. As I said earlier, there may be more questions than we have time to answer, but anything that we are not able to address during the town hall will be forwarded to the appropriate department for an answer, and you will receive a response if you have provided us with your contact information. All right, I think we're going to jump to questions. Our first question comes from Jordan, who's one of our students who sent her the question in by email prior to the town hall. The question is, how robust will online learning be for the fall semester? My sister and I live near Manitoba, so we are likely staying home for the term, but would like to make sure that online classes will be as sufficient as they were this year.
Well, let me start off by saying that we understand that there will be a number of students, significant numbers of students, who, because of travel or personal circumstances, health reasons, will not yet be able to attend to the campus in the fall. And so therefore, when the provost may want to elaborate on this in talking to all the academic units about their plans for being able to offer an increasing amount of in-person. We understand that there is going to have to be a robust delivery of online. And for courses that are going to be delivered in person, ways in which students can access those courses as they may need, as may be needed. But also importantly, a goal right now of doing this planning, of undertaking this planning, is so that all courses will be clearly marked as to whether or not they are completely offered online or through other remote means, whether or not there will be some expectations of in-person attendance, whether or not actually it's an in-person course, so that students can make those choices that work for them. Understanding that required courses will absolutely need to be made available to students who are not able to attend in person. I don't know if the provost wants to add anything to that.
Thank you very much. I think that you captured it, Madam President. But I thought I might just add that it would be good perhaps for students to understand exactly the process that we're engaged in right now. So whatever program or school you're part of, your faculty members are right now working to figure out what is the best combination of options to offer students in the coming year. We want to be able to offer some in-person learning activities and other activities for those students who are in the jurisdiction and who want that very much. We've heard from many students who are looking for in-person activities as soon as that becomes possible within public health guidelines. We've also heard from many students like you who are worried they won't be able easily to get to Toronto. And so we will have to have remote access. And so the faculty members are working very hard right now to make those plans to come up with flexible options for learning in the fall, so that when you start to enroll in courses in May, you will have a clear indication of what options are available for whatever your situation may be. We also, I think it's important also to know that we will not be radically changing course delivery modes in the middle of the term. So if public health regulations shift and change through the course of the fall term, as they have been doing, we would be making sure that students who enrolled for a course are able to complete it in the same mode that they signed up for, so that we won't change in the middle of the term. If there are adjustments that we need to make, if we're able to increasingly return to campus, we would wait till the next term to start introducing that. So I hope that's helpful. And I understand how much everyone is eager to know what the fall will look like. We're trying to plan for all eventualities so that students can have full information when they make their decisions and do their planning.
Thank you for that, Lisa. We have lots of questions coming in fast and furious, so I'm going to jump to the next question, which was submitted live from SARB, and they would like to know about the graduation ceremony and whether it will be on campus. I believe they're referring to this summer as the time that they're interested in.
With deep regret, unfortunately, we are not going to be in the position of having our typical in-person lovely set of convocations. There simply will not be a sufficient number of people who have been vaccinated by June. And certainly we will not be at a point of herd community. Having said that, of course, we are going to be doing everything we can, no matter where students are located in the world, to, as we have this last year, to provide some special mail out items and to arrange for an online, a virtual convocation ceremony so that people can celebrate. Hopefully they can celebrate with some friends or with some family wherever they are. And we're also very committed to continuing to offer all students who have been affected by COVID-19 and not being able to have an in-person ceremony, an invitation as soon as we are able to resume our convocations to come and attend if they're able. We really, of course, understand that some students will not be able to take advantage of that subsequent invitation, but we really want to extend it to as many students as possible so that if they are able to come to a later in-person ceremony with their family, we're going to be able to accommodate you. I don't know whether or not, Jeff, you want to add anything about what's planned for this upcoming June virtual ceremony.
Thank you, President Lenton. You covered the points really well. The one thing that I would add is that we are exploring whether there be an opportunity to have some kind of ability to have some people on campus for some special celebrations, not the direct ceremonies, but some other form of in-person gathering, if it's at all possible, in an outdoor space where people could take pictures or celebrate. That, of course, would be subject to health regulations, and we're exploring that possibility at this time.
Thank you for that, Jeff. We've had a number of questions that have come in regarding vaccination, so I'm going to try and combine a few together. And these have come in during the live town hall. And so participants would like to know about what return to campus means in terms of vaccinations. Are staff, students, faculty required to be vaccinated in order to return to work? And what happens if staff are not able to be vaccinated? Will they be required to return to work?
As far as I understand it, and I invite anyone on the panel to correct me, we have not heard from either the province or from public health that there would be any mandatory vaccination program for universities or colleges. And so in the absence of that, like our city officials and our provincial officials, we are urging all individuals, staff, course instructors, faculty, students, if they're able to have a vaccine and when they're able to get access to a vaccine, to have the vaccine. You know, at the end of the day, getting back to any kind of normality is going to require that we hit that herd immunity. I think it's a reminder, an important reminder for everyone, though, that reaching herd immunity, getting enough people vaccinated, it doesn't necessarily mean, it helps manage pandemics, but it doesn't necessarily help manage individual susceptibility to COVID-19. And so, you know, it's not as if even when we reach herd immunity that we aren't going to necessarily need to still take, you know, some precautions and be careful about our health. But at this time, we are not expecting to take the position that if you haven't had a vaccination, that means that you cannot attend a campus. It may well be that individuals who, for whatever reason, are unable to actually have a vaccine may make requests, you know, to afford them greater protection. We have rolled out this transitional work from home, work remotely policy. We expect that there will be a number of staff and potentially course instructors, faculty members who are seeking to make alternative arrangements, at least until, you know, we're perhaps much further along than we are now. And that's I think the current state of understanding that we have around how we will approach the challenges for individuals who are not vaccinated. Does anyone on my team want to add anything to that?
I might just add that we don't have any plans to impose some kind of a requirement for people to demonstrate they've been vaccinated or tested before they come to campus. That would only occur if there was a law passed provincially or federally requiring that kind of action. However, there will continue to be rigorous pre-screening for every individual every day that they are planning to come to campus. There's a pre-screening tool we're already using for anybody who has a reason to be on campus on a particular day. Each day they would come beforehand, they would be going through a list of questions to determine if there's any risks that they might have been exposed to COVID, for instance, or have symptoms of COVID, in which case they're instructed not to come to campus. And we will also be ensuring that we know who is coming to campus so that we're able to, in the event that a positive case or a risk of a case should show up, we're able to contact others who may have been near that person. So we have already put in place over the last few months very careful measures to discourage people from coming to campus, to ask them not to come if there's any reason for concern, and to accommodate their work or their studies remotely during that period that they need to stay off campus. I did want to just mention that someone in the chat, I think it's Nabil, thank you very much for pointing out that you're wondering how we could guarantee that campuses would stay open throughout the fall. And I should have qualified one of my answers, because I said students would be able to complete a course in the mode that they begin it. The one exception to that is that if public health regulations change and we are not able to continue a course in person, we would of course then find ways to complete it remotely. We would certainly always be following public health. Everything that we're going to do, as the president said, will be subject to the guidance of Toronto Public Health, as it has been from the start of the pandemic.
Thank you for that, Lisa. Our next question comes from Mariana, who is a student, and her question is, my course has classes on both university campuses in North York and downtown. And so they are wondering if there are any plans to concentrate classes on just one of our campuses to avoid commuting between multiple campuses.
We've already begun to anticipate the challenge of not only moving between campuses, but also some students may have an online course, and then they may have an in-person course. And if those are too close together, it could be challenging for the student potentially, for example, to get to a space, a quiet space, where they could actually do that online course. So we are taking a look at how we would manage those kinds of complexities. At this time, I was not aware that we were planning on concentrating certain kinds of courses at different locations, but rather trying to ensure that students don't have those conflicts, potentially on the same day. But I'm not sure whether or not Lucy or Lisa, you have anything else that you can add to that?
I think I would just say that, again, it'll be really important in enrolling for courses to be clear, to check the information about how that course is delivered and where it's delivered, the extent to which it can be accessed remotely, or there will be perhaps recorded lectures, or the extent to which you're required to be in a physical location to complete that course. I think every student is going to need to line that all up and arrange their schedules as well as they can to make everything possible. And what the university will do is try to make sure that there are places on campus that can be booked to go and listen to a recorded lecture, for instance, or participate in an online session in between your in-person classes, for instance. So it'll be a joint effort to make all of that possible.
Thank you for that. Our next question.
Sorry, Jade,
Oh,
could I also just respond to the colleague's question, just because it's relevant in the chat around HyFlex. We're trying right now to explore the ability of HyFlex in terms of the number of classrooms, because we absolutely want to be able to support any faculty members who want to try these different ways of making sure that students can be accommodated both in person and online. So we're looking at that now and how many classrooms we could fit out with the high flex. So I want to say a tentative yes. You know, we would be doing everything we could to accommodate you. I guess the only restriction would be whether or not we have more demand than our ability to actually upgrade classrooms with the high flex. And so there, in that situation, we might then have to prioritize classes, you know, based on those that for student learning outcomes, or we would have to actually talk to all the units to figure out, you know, how many we could accommodate. But we would certainly be trying to accommodate as many requests as we receive.
Thank you for that. Our next question comes from a staff member, Megan, who would like to know, when considering coming back to campus, they usually take the subway, but no longer feel safe doing so. Will York have parking available to those who prefer to drive? And if we are choosing to work in a hybrid way, will there be a discounted rate for parking passes?
Could I ask the VPFA if any work has been done on this yet?
Sure, thank you. We have begun to do work, because we are getting the question quite a bit about whether there be alternatives to monthly parking passes. Understanding that we already have daily passes, but there will be a point at which that some decide that they should have some kind of a pass, not wanting to pay the daily rate, but won't be on campus full time. So through our parking services office, we are looking at this question now, and we'll be able to communicate what those options will be through our return to campus website in the pretty near future.
Thank you for that, Carol. Our next question comes from Janessa, a faculty member at York. And they write, thank you for your time and effort in keeping York functioning during this pandemic. Has there been any discussion on the process to get in-person researchers back into the lab this summer, around May 2021? Something like a case-by-case approval for particular research studies and protocols. They are hoping that in April 2021, they'll have a chance to show how their low-risk work in biometrics lab and study protocols in terms of getting safer than getting groceries are for low-risk participants, and they would need to collect information.
Could I ask the VP of Research and Innovation to take that one?
Thank you, Rhonda. So we are planning for increased research presence on campus for our researchers. While doing so, our priority remains to have a conducive, a healthy environment on campus. So our plans are actually for later, you know, for the start of the fall term, for example. But if researchers have or need immediate access to the research facilities, they can definitely submit an online form requesting for limited access to the campus. At this particular time, we have about 800 researchers who are accessing campus facilities in a healthy and safe way, and these permissions were granted based on the requests made. In terms of research activities, our preference still is that if you can conduct research, you know, while being away from the campus, that is the best safe way of conducting research. So the short answer to the questions is that the researchers can submit an online form through which can be reviewed by the Associate Dean of Research and by my office, and they can have, if needed, access to the campus.
Thank you for that, Amir. Our next question comes from a staff member, and they would like to know what factors go into determining when it is safe to return to our workplace, and why does it appear that the fall seems to be most likely the time? And there's just some concern about the new variants emerging and understanding how that may impact our return to work in the fall.
So from the very beginning of the pandemic reaching Canada, certainly, we took the approach that the health and safety of our entire community has to come first in all cases and inform all the actions that we would be taking. And so we started working with other universities, with Toronto Public Health, with Provincial Public Health, with the Ministry of Colleges and Universities, and in fact, even with Universities Canada, in terms of really sharing all of the information that we had access to. You know, we also had the good fortune of having several faculty members who were directly involved in, you know, pandemic mathematical modeling, for example. So we had all this information coming in terms and taking advice from public health and MCU. And in some cases, of course, that advice turned into regulation. So, you know, with the province making the decision, for example, about what zone Toronto would be in. And so that kind of changed everything. And then we've been working with Senate Executive on recommendations based on that input. So now, of course, we are following the rollout of the vaccine and still continuing to work very closely with public health agencies and the provincial government on when they're expecting, for example, herd immunity to take effect. We're also, of course, following the variants, as are, I'm sure, all of you, and the effectiveness of the vaccines against the variants. You know, people have talked about the fact that it's a bit of a race at the moment between vaccination and the variants. And, you know, we have seen successive waves of the pandemic. And so, of course, if we were to move into any situation where either the effectiveness of the vaccines against the variants were problematic, the province, public health would, in all likelihood, as we're hoping now to transition from lockdown to the red zone, you know, could quite easily take further steps, including recommendations for universities, including what legislation could be, what regulations could be in place. So we're going to continue to work very closely with those bodies, both government and public health, to make sure that the actions that we're recommending to Senate Executive are in complete alignment with a safe return to our campuses. I'm not sure if anyone on the panel wants to add anything.
Thank you for that, President Lenton. Our next question comes from a staff member, and it's actually a follow-up question from a previous town hall. So at an earlier town hall, you discussed a voluntary exit program. It has been some time and we haven't heard anything. Will you be launching the program soon?
Mary Catherine, are you, I'm not sure, is Sheila, or are you going to take that question?
I'd be happy to, President Lenton. Thank you for the question. So the voluntary exit program is not proceeding at this time. We recognize that there has been some anticipation of a program of this nature given some earlier questions at previous town halls. And so we thought it was important to let the community know in this forum today. So thanks again for the question, that this type of program is not being planned for implementation at this time. While we were originally examining the possibility of this type of program, given the circumstances of the uncertainties of the pandemic at the time when we first started thinking about it, we've really now turned our minds to a safe return to campus, as President Lenton has been discussing throughout our time together today. And we're really focused on how to best support the safe return to a campus in the fall and the rollout of our transitional remote work policy at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. Our next question comes from a student, Nancy, and they would like to know, what are our plans for in-person conferences? Do we have an attendee capacity limit? And are there any regulations in place to support large-scale events in the fall?
Yes, unfortunately, that looks very unlikely indeed, which is why even for classes, we have really thought through what's the best possible learning experience. that in person really aids, really contributes to understanding that bringing together large groups of students is going to be extremely problematic. And it's going to be extremely problematic because from what we know now, in terms of estimations for the summer and for the fall, that there's a very high likelihood that some social distancing requirements will still be in place. And once you introduce the need for social distancing, that very quickly leads to a cap on the total number of individuals that you can bring together at any one time. And what's informed our thinking for classrooms then is no more than a group of 25 students coming together in one place at one time with an instructor, so 26. And that would therefore be applied equally to co-curricular activities, to conferences, for example, of large gatherings. The other huge advantage about not bringing together large gatherings is that if there were to be any individual that did actually have COVID-19, that you'd want to be minimizing any exposure at any particular time. But the main thinking behind this approach is, to really accommodate social distancing, to try, as we have been incredibly successful to date. And I think it's really important to remind everyone on the call that this past year, we have somewhere between 75 and 100 courses running each term. And we managed that safely without anyone getting COVID-19 from being brought together in those classes. And so it's an expansion of that. And I think we also have to ask ourselves is that if you really want to play to enhancing learning, is it bringing large groups of people together in a lecture hall to listen to the professor? I'm not minimizing the value of that, that's very important, but the ability of the professor to do that remotely is relatively easier at least, compared to those smaller interactive hands-on learning, studios, labs, tutorials, whatever they might be, experiential education, where that in-person is really a huge help. So that's the approach that we've taken. It's again, very consistent with safety and health regulations, but it has to apply equally to extracurricular and co-curricular. Now, the one exception that we have an ability, and I'm going to turn it over to the provost just to clarify, for summer and well into fall, we have been looking at outdoor gatherings. And we've are looking at renting canopies so that we could have the booking at some outdoor spaces, again for learning, but potentially also for co-curricular activities. And I really want to defer to someone who knows more than I do about any rules around the maximum size that could be possible in that kind of situation.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'll jump in there to say that you can imagine that when we're setting up outdoor spaces, they're a bit more expandable. We can take up bigger area, put additional canopies, additional chairs, make sure that there's good physical distancing. So we are anticipating that it may be possible, again, there's quite a bit of uncertainty, but it may be possible to bring a group, for instance, up to a size of 50 together for example, an orientation event, a panel discussion, alumni event, some kind of networking event. We're right now just developing the kinds of programming that could really benefit students and really enhance the educational experience. So outdoor spaces may have a little bit more flexibility, but again, we're planning with an understanding that we're going to have to be nimble and responsive to changing public health conditions. So I think that conferences of the size that you were asking about are not, unfortunately, going to be possible for some time yet, but that doesn't mean that we can't plan for and be ready for situations where we could bring 25 or maybe even outdoors up to 50 people together at a time.
I do just want to add that we're all so eager to, and I certainly feel this every day, to start doing some in-person activities. It's amazing how some activities are really, quite challenging. not to have to do everything on Zoom. And of course, there's Zoom fatigue. On the other hand, I have to say that there's no reason why we cannot continue with very large conferences online. And some of those conferences have been incredibly successful in terms of participation, because of course, for some people, it's actually easier to participate in a conference, no matter where they're located in the world, if it is online. So, we'll certainly expect in 21-22 to continue to hold events, to hold conferences. It's just that there'll be a bit more of a delay in any kind of large in-person on-campus conferences, for example.
If I could just follow up on that theme. And I know a lot of our students are really interested in these in-person opportunities, conferences or otherwise. But as the president and the provost said, because conferences have now been remote, they have been incredible opportunities to participate when they were restricted in the past. So international conferences that were limited because of the sheer cost of travel, or the size of the rooms, or the number of speakers from around the world, are now so much more open and available for our students to attend, but equally for our staff, where in the past, due to cost limitations, we may have selected 1 or 2 or 3 to attend a conference. Now they're much more cost effective and offered in a format that we can open it up to many more participants. So there are some opportunities that are available in this remote format.
Thank you for that. We have a couple of questions that have come in around accommodations for students. So we have students wondering about the type of accommodation that will be provided to them, given that they're in different time zones, or they may be experiencing challenges due to the political situation in their country. There's questions from students who are mature and who are have young families and are dealing with childcare issues, and students who are studying online and finding it quite challenging. And so the question is about ways in which the university is making supports available to students who are experiencing a number of these challenges, and what might be done to increase those supports as we look to the fall.
Lisa, could I ask you and Lucy to take on those kind of related questions?
Sure, I'll be happy to start, and perhaps Lucy can fill in. I would really encourage anyone who has an issue that they are aware of around accessing class and being able to manage the kinds of expectations of their courses. If you feel that you have a disability, a health issue, a family issue that is going to definitely need special accommodations in order to be able to do the course, you should be in touch with Student Accessibility Services. We have an outstanding team that has a great system for really advising, making sure your faculty member is aware, making sure that you're understanding the options that are available for you to be formally accommodated. So that would be the sort of formal side of accommodation that you can plan in advance. And then, of course, we have the more informal issues or kind of on-the-spot issues that arise for students if they are finding they can't get back to the country at the time that they perhaps were hoping to. They've got an illness. They've got you've got a problem with your internet, perhaps, or with a situation that you're facing of some kind in the location where you are. And there we have really communicated very clearly with our instructors about the kinds of issues students are raising. Instructors aren't always aware of all the different kinds of situations that students in their classes are facing. And so really raising awareness with faculty members. The Senate Executive Committee has also put out a communication around the kinds of practices that can be helpful to students, really urging professors to be flexible wherever they can, to recognize there are students studying from different time zones, for instance, students who are juggling many domestic responsibilities alongside their studies, who may not have a quiet space, may not have a steady internet connection at a particular time. I want to take a moment to just profoundly thank all of our course directors who have made extraordinary efforts to make sure that all students can access their courses and are included and have some flexibility to deal with whatever their circumstances are. We've heard from many students who have been really grateful for those efforts and for whom it has made all the difference. We do find that instructors are adjusting their practices as they learn more and more about the challenges that different students are facing. But as a student, I would urge you, if you find that you're not getting the kind of accommodation that you need, or that you have a problem that you weren't anticipating, that's making it difficult for you to complete an assignment or to complete the course, your first course is always to talk to your instructor, your course director. But I urge you, if that's not generating the results that you need, there is a chair of your department, there is an undergraduate program director of your program, there is a dean's office, there is student accessibility services. There are multiple places that I hope that you would turn to in the event that you're struggling to get your accommodation needs met. I think that I would say also that we are getting better and better at understanding what students need in this situation. UIT is sometimes able to provide support for, for technology, for instance. So depending on what your need is, there is usually a way to sort out a response. Where we find that there are problems, our chairs of departments, our dean's offices are definitely intervening to problem solve, to find out what is going wrong, why is the student struggling so much, and what can we do about it. So we are addressing these situations just as quickly as we can as they arise. But I also really encourage students to speak out, be proactive, try and get the accommodations you need, and alert someone else in your program if you're not able to. Lucy, what have I missed?
You've missed very little. I'm just going to take the opportunity to put in a plug, especially for any of our new students, newly admitted students who might be on this participating today. And that is, we do have a Student Accessibility Services Office. If you have a disability, whether it is permanent, intermittent, or temporary, please be in touch with Student Accessibility Services. Get your documentation in early. Even if you never need an accommodation, that's fine. But in the event that you do need one when you're already registered, it's so much quicker that they can work with you and your faculty member to ensure the right accommodation is in place for you. And our staff in that area are also supporting faculty members. So during a test or an exam where the accommodation might be, for example, additional time, they're supporting the faculty member to set the system so that you do have that additional time and are writing at the same time as your fellow students. And the last thing I will say is special circumstances are not unique because of COVID. Our students have busy and complex lives. Even when we are all on campus and everyone is well, there may be that time that a student parent has a sick child, or there are other circumstances. So as the provost said, always speak to your faculty member first, explain the circumstance, explain what it is that would really help you be successful. And that's a really important first step for you.
Thank you for that. Our next question is coming to us live. Louisa, could you go ahead and ask your question?
Thank you. My concern is based on the classrooms. I know that everything is still up in the air based on this, but on the hope of what is to transpire for fall, my question is, are classes going to be deep cleaned between classes? My biggest concern is that the classrooms run, cleaning becomes difficult, if at all. This is definitely where the issue can get a bit out of hand. And I'm just concerned for our students and their well-being, and just making sure that they hear that something is going to be put forward so that their safety is always first and foremost. Thank you.
Carol, I'm wondering if you could talk not only about classroom cleaning, but also bathroom cleaning as well.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I don't want to keep repeating the same, but to be clear that we follow public health guidelines with respect to cleaning spaces as well. But I think that for more clarity, I've just spoken with our AVP Facility Services this morning, and we'll be developing a standard that we will publish on the Return to Campus website in that area, so that you know exactly what we're doing in terms of cleaning classrooms, washrooms, and other spaces, and how often they'll be cleaned. Certainly, our ability to do the, or not our ability, but our ability to schedule space usage will depend on the type of cleaning we need to do and what times during the day. So all of these things fall together. The other standard that I've asked be prepared so that we can also post it for information on return to the campus is about the ventilation systems in buildings, how often, what types of filters we use, how often those filters are changed, et cetera. So just to share the information with the community so that you can compare it to public health standards. I expect that we'll not only meet but exceed those public health standards, and that the exact characteristics of our cleaning programs and our ventilation programs will be transparent to the community members.
I just want to be clear on something that Carol said. Carol, is it my understanding that in between classes, there will be a cleaning that's being done in between?
That is yes.
Okay.
Can I just jump in to say what we are planning for?
There will be cleaning classes that will not be, they won't be scheduled back to back so that the cleaning can, the appropriate cleaning standards can happen.
Could I just add that we're planning an assumption right now that there would be a 1 hour gap between groups booked into a space, so that there would be time for that safe egress, cleaning, and then safe entry for the next group.
Thank you. And I think just building on Carol's answer, we got a question that came in from a staff member who wanted to know about the cleaning for office spaces, and also what types of safety features will be included, especially for those staff working in open spaces.
Would you like me to start with this one? Physical distancing requirements, as dictated by public health, will be in place for open spaces where people work in open spaces. For those who work in offices, I think our suggestion at this time would be that they be single individual person in those spaces, and that you don't hold meetings in those spaces unless physical distancing can be maintained. Cleaning schedule, again, will make available to the community to make sure that you are aware of what it is. Of course, if it's a single occupied space, the cleaning standard will be different than it would be in those spaces that are occupied by a number of people. But again, this is all part of the back to campus planning, and we'll make sure that it's well communicated as part of the communication related to coming back onto campus.
And just in relationship to social distancing as well, something else that we're looking at is if and when the use of plexiglass would be appropriate in order to try to maintain safety. So we really have to look at each space and think about how many people are normally in that space, what's the easiest way to maintain social distancing. Is use of plexiglass the logical solution? So, when we started off today, I said we don't have all the details worked out, but I do want to emphasize that we are looking at all of those different options to ensure that people do feel comfortable coming back into the spaces.
Thank you for that. We've had a couple of questions that have come in about if there was a COVID case on campus. And so they'd like to know if a staff or faculty or student were to contract COVID due to being on campus, what measures would be put in place to support them by the university? Is there contact tracing? And for example, if a staff member contracts COVID at work and now has to quarantine for 14 days, is that staff member working from home at that point of recovery?
I'm not sure I'm the best person to take this question. Would that be you, Lisa, or Mary Catherine, or Lucy?
If I can, I'll let Mary Catherine go, and then I'll take the student.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, President. With respect to contact tracing, absolutely. So we do have contact tracing in place, of course, for incidents of staff, faculty, or student contracting and transmission. And as we go through the contact tracing process, we have protocols in place around self-isolation for those who have been in direct contact. And I believe the next piece of it was working remotely. And so again, that depends on the circumstances. In all cases, if an individual is sick, it is important that they take time to rest and recuperate. And of course, there would not be an expectation of work. If a person is not ill, but rather self-isolating due to a potential contact, and they have the ability to work from home, they would be able to work remotely in those circumstances. Thank you.
So what I'll add is we have hired public health nurses because this is health information and it's kept quite private. So as soon as we are informed or notified that a student either suspects they have COVID or has been tested and has COVID, our offices are immediately in touch with the student, and we do extensive contact tracing to understand all of their footprints. If their footprint has been on the university campus, perhaps they attended a class, then again, we do the tracing to understand everyone with whom they've been in contact with. We also direct them to work closely with public health. If it's a student who lives on campus in a residence, if they have a sniffle, if they suspect it's COVID, or if they have been tested and know it is, we immediately move them into a self-contained suite. If they have, and in that suite, by the way, we will ensure that 3 meals a day are delivered. We check in with them twice a day, once with a wellness check. So we're just asking them a series of questions about their temperature, et cetera, how they feel. And once, simply to see how they're doing, because being isolated for 14 days isn't simple and can introduce other traumas. So we stay in touch with all of those students, but we also follow all of their footsteps. If they had a roommate, we will immediately isolate the roommate as well. So we do everything we can to ensure the safety, to arrange for the COVID tests as necessary. We arrange the transportation to and from the testing if the student lives in residence as necessary. And we do everything we can. For the students who simply let us know because they are students, even if they have not been on the footprint, we will provide the same services in that we will touch base with each of those students, even though they're self-isolating in their own homes, in their own circumstances. We will continue to support them, touching base with them at least 2 times a day to see how we can help them.
Thank you for that. We have had a couple of questions related to these answers that maybe I could just do a follow-up question. So participants are wondering whether PPE is provided to people coming onto campus, and whether or not if there was an outbreak in the building, and there's a question about what the number of cases would constitute an outbreak, whether or not if it was all happening in one building, whether there's a possibility to divide or segregate the ventilation systems in buildings.
Carol, perhaps you could start.
Sure, I might turn it to someone else like the VPRI or the provost about PPE. I know that we do provide PPE now, but perhaps some more detail about that. With respect to ventilation in buildings, every building is different. They're of different ages, and the amount of fresh air that comes into different buildings is different. And of course, then we have to affect the ventilation system according to those specific building conditions. We are looking at every building and the ventilation systems now, as we have since the pandemic began, to know how to appropriately monitor them. It would be unusual to be able to separate a ventilation system within one building, but I'll ask the question of our facilities folks specifically. My expectation is that for the most part, once a ventilation system, these buildings are run by very large systems, heating ventilation systems, and they basically act pretty much as a one thing. But I will ask that specific question and make sure it's taken into account in our planning.
And in terms of the number of cases that would constitute an outbreak on campus, can anybody answer that question?
Sorry, if there was an outbreak on campus?
The question is how many cases would need to appear at once in order to be considered an outbreak?
So outbreaks are very much defined by public health. So they control what is deemed to be an outbreak. And of course, it's possible for any member of our community to have COVID-19 and not to tell us, but to choose to tell public health. And then public health will contact us, and we have a very good relationship with public health. And so that would really be defined by them. And my understanding of this is that it's not necessarily just a matter of the number, but I think it has more to do with the numbers that are in a particular location. But in any event, we would take guidance from them and then move forward very expeditiously with our plans. Now, if we were to have several cases, in fact, even if we were to have one case, we would also, we were told about the case, we would likely consult as well with public health just on what protocols we would be taking, just to ensure that in all instances, we're taking appropriate steps. I don't know if Lucy wants to add something to what I've said.
Again, as the president said, public health defines an outbreak. So it is not just the number, but also the relationship. And that is, if we had 2 cases and through contact tracing, it was determined that one was exposed to COVID because of the other, then with as few as 2 cases, public health, if it were in one building, for example, a residence, then public health could label as few as 2 cases as an outbreak. But we work very closely with public health and on the contact tracing, providing them full information that's extensive, but it's very much up to them whether they determine it's an outbreak.
However, I just want to flip that. A university could also have, it's possible, a few cases that have no relationship to one another and where contact tracing demonstrated that they got COVID-19 outside of the campus, and those individuals are not coming to campus, or if they are in a residence, that they would then be self-isolated. So that circumstance may not be declared an outbreak because it's not an outbreak that's occurring through contact at the university. These were outside cases, and public health is satisfied that if they are attending to our campuses for any reason, and the provost earlier mentioned the screening, so we would normally expect anyone who doesn't live on the campus not to come to our campuses if in fact they've tested positive. And as I said, even if it's a student in residence, they would then be isolated for the required period of time. So that situation might not be declared an outbreak. So that's the kind of the complexity of how you define an outbreak.
Thank you for that. Our next question is coming to us live. Heba, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm a PhD student who also TAs, and I'm also an international student. And my question is, since TAs do not necessarily make the decisions for the courses, are we going to be given the option to TA online, especially if we are out of town? Thank you.
So I think it's a really good question, and thank you for the question, because obviously in the first instance, faculty members and course instructors who are actually responsible for the teaching of the course, they've been asked in the first instance to work together in a program area to figure out, what courses could be offered with some in-person on-campus components, not necessarily, every week, but with some component. I know that many of those faculty members are indeed quite concerned that if they're making assumptions about, for example, having tutorials offered in person for a very large class, where otherwise there might be no opportunity to have in person, that this was going to work for their TAs. And I believe that in most cases, what is being planned, again, is we're trying to understand everybody's unique circumstances and trying to be as flexible as possible. And so in that kind of situation, an instructor, would talk to the assigned graduate students for that particular course and see if any of those assigned TAs did have difficulty with being able to attend. And frankly, it would probably suit the students a lot better in the class if some of those tutorials were delivered, especially in a class where you had many sections, online, somewhere in person, to accommodate the different needs of the students. If there's only one TA, then I think that the professor would have to necessarily, or the course instructor would have to necessarily work closely with that TA to see what the obstacles were for that TA that might make it, challenging to do something in person. Now, I don't know, maybe the provost knows how situations would be managed, if there was a kind of a tension between the student learning outcome being met and the needs of an assigned graduate student.
Yes, thanks, Rhonda. I would just say that for a TA who is actually not only an international student, but abroad, outside the country, we can run into some complexities around paying for work that is performed outside the country. So it really depends very much on the circumstances, and I don't want to try and opine, Hiba, on your specific circumstances or anyone's, but that would have to be worked through as a possible complicating factor. I think that, we will hope that in many, many courses, there's a good alignment between the number of students who really want an online tutorial and the number of students who are very keen and able to have an in-person tutorial, and allocating TAs accordingly. We'll have to wait and see what plans come in for the different courses. And I think there will inevitably be a combination of individual circumstances, pretty much as we get into the fall term, and we're really nailing down the details of who's going to do what and exactly how this is going to work and what the public health regulations are at the time. But there is an awareness of this vast range of circumstances. And Hiba, thank you for your question, especially highlighting the challenges for students and employees who might be overseas.
And I just want to emphasize that I think we have got to be very respectful of the fact that there might be some students who in fact are still facing travel restrictions. There could be some new students who are facing visa delays. So there could be some students who have different health concerns. So we're really going to have to work hard to try our best to sort out all of these arrangements, as complex as they might be.
Thank you for that. I've combined a couple of questions together, and we have questions about, given that there will be likely restrictions in terms of the capacity in buildings. It's suggested here in one question at 30%. Is York going to be prioritizing students being in the space versus staff and faculty? And also, how will we deal with non-community members who may want to attend or visit the university, but might be taking up capacity for community members that need to be on campus? And how will we manage through that?
From the very beginning, what we've said as a community is that we necessarily need to prioritize the teaching and learning and research activities of the university. This is the core of what makes up a university, and we simply must prioritize those activities. In the case of teaching and learning and research, we then looked a little bit deeper and said, where is it possible to do those activities well through remote formats, and where is it not so possible to do those activities? And we've really been guided by that, of prioritizing the research and the teaching and learning that needs that on-campus, in-person, type of activity. That's one of the reasons why for the summer and, for the fall, we're looking at how long could we also do things outdoors to try to maximize the availability of those, teaching and learning and research spaces, looking very carefully at maximizing the use of our buildings. But this then, of course, means that we can't, if we're prioritizing all those needs, then it may well be that needs of some needs will simply not be able to be met. And we would certainly always be focusing on the teaching and learning and research. So it may be the case that external members of the community would very much like to have access, but those kinds of requests would have to be considered after all of the teaching and learning and research and service needs of the university were met. And I'm going to speculate, unfortunately for fall, there's probably going to be a very narrow window. That wouldn't mean that we wouldn't consider any requests. This past year, we received some requests, and it went to our committee, of our continuity planning committee, to assess whether or not, with everything else going on, was there a possibility to accommodate that request? Because of course we want to be good neighbors and good partners. And if we could accommodate it, we would certainly try. But I just want to be realistic that with everything going on in the fall, opportunities for non-community members to access the campuses are going to be pretty slim.
Thank you for that. We have a couple of questions that have come in from employees that have concerns around their own mental health. So they're either experiencing anxiety because they are immune compromised and are worried about the fact that there may be people on campus who are not vaccinated, employees who feel that they could come in contact and contract COVID and may not have enough sick time to be able to get well at home, and student and employees who are feeling quite isolated after working at home for the last year and are actually quite fearful in leaving their house and returning to work. And so what kinds of supports have the university put in place to support employees who are experiencing this level of mental health stress?
I'm going to ask others to answer that question, but I just want to state for everybody that this is a very anxiety-producing time. I don't think I know anyone who has not felt the stress of this environment. And so I'm incredibly sympathetic to all of our colleagues, our community members, just for dealing every day with so much uncertainty and so much potential risk, to health of ourselves and to those that we love. So the university is doing, this is why from the beginning we felt we really absolutely have to be thoughtful about listening to those concerns, putting in place the supports, expanding those supports as needed. So I'd like to turn it over to maybe the provost or Lucy or Mary Catherine to elaborate on where some of those resources lie in case you're not already familiar. Mary Catherine, could you maybe start from an employee point of view?
Thank you for the question, President Lenton. So certainly this is mental health of all of our staff, faculty, and students is of utmost priority to us. And there are, of course, a number of resources that we want to ensure that everyone is familiar with. And so for anybody for a staff member or faculty member who are requesting accommodation that feel that there is a reason that they cannot return to work and that they must seek out another opportunity given their personal medical concern, that those questions are addressed through our employee well-being office, through the unit of health, safety, and employee well-being. And through that area of the university is where we would be able to interact with you and discuss what the appropriate accommodation would be in the circumstances of the condition that you are presenting to us. And beyond that, in terms of resources, I would encourage everyone to please familiarize yourself, for staff and faculty, to our employee family and assistance program that's offered through Morneau Chappelle. And on this website, there is a number of resources to support you. As well, these same resources are available through the Health, Safety, and Employee Wellbeing website at York University. We provide routine reminders through Wellness Wednesdays that you may find helpful to you from time to time, depending on your circumstances. So those are a few of the resources that I would point to with respect to staff and faculty. Thank you.
And I'll add for students, of course, all of our students know about our Counseling, Health, and Wellbeing Center. There is no wait list. So we really urge you to connect with that office. If you're feeling anxious, if you simply need someone to really talk to. As well, for students, well, for all of our students, but in particular for students outside of Ontario, different time zones, etc., we have a new service and you can access it through the counseling website. It is called Keep Me Safe. It is offered 24/7, so 7 days a week, year-round, 24 hours a day, in multi-languages. There is counseling support. So whether you are within the vicinity that you can contact our counseling services, or whether you're outside of that jurisdiction and prefer the Keep Me Safe 24/7 option, both options are available to you. Simply go to the Counseling, Health, and Wellbeing website and all the information is there. As well, mental wellness has many aspects to it, and one of them is physical fitness. So I do remind everyone through athletics and recreation, and this is for faculty, staff, and students, we have programs available throughout the entire week that you can tune into. It's Move You at the Athletics and Recreation website, and they offer everything from flex classes, mindfulness classes, a variety of physical fitness activities. So I do encourage all of you to, as best as you can, stay well and take care of yourself. And if you're not feeling well, please contact us and we'll support you to the best of our ability.
I'd just like to turn it over to Lisa. She has a clarification to her response she provided earlier and just wanted to provide a little bit more information. Lisa?
Yes, thanks, Jade. I had mentioned course enrollment windows and how important it will be for students to really look at the description of each course and how it's going to be delivered. And I mentioned the month of May, and that was not quite right. During May, we'll be coding all of that information into the system. And the course enrollment for new students will open on June the 8th. So early June rather than May. For continuing students, it will open on July the 6th. So it'll be over the summer that you'll be able to see all that information about the courses and select your courses. I understand that we have also been getting quite a few questions about the winter term. And of course, we're not at a point yet where we're making any firm decisions about the winter term. Of course, we all hope that things will get progressively better, progressively more open. But it's also possible that we'll find that there's another wave that happens in the winter, or that public health restrictions again tighten. So as we get closer, as we get into the fall term, and a little bit closer, we will begin to make those plans again so that we can give people advance notice of what their options are for the winter term. So you'll have to wait a little bit longer to hear more about winter, but the approach will be very similar, following Toronto Public Health guidelines, trying to give clear information to everyone with lots of advance notice so that you can make your plans. That's about all I can say now. I wanted just to also thank the previous questioner, though, about raising the issue of the adjustment we may all have as we start to return to campus, that this is going to be a very big change. It is going to be a bit unsettling. It's going to feel different at first. And I think that all of us on the panel will no doubt be thinking about, how could we assist all of us collectively to make that adjustment and to feel safe doing so. I know that there are plans afoot for a significant awareness and education campaign as we get into the summer, a revamped website to make resources and information really available so people can get answers and know where they can get help. So thank you very much for raising that question. I do think it's quite an undertaking, this gradual return to campus, and we'll have to work closely together across the community to do it well and support everyone.
So we have reached the end of our time this afternoon, and I know that there are a number of questions that have come in that did not receive an answer during our town hall today. If you provided your name and email address, we will be able to respond to those questions directly. If you post your question anonymously but would like a follow-up to your question, if you could send an email to conversations@yorku.ca, we will be able to redirect that question to the correct office and make sure that you get that answer. I'd also like to let you know that we have posted a survey on our website, conversations.info.yorku.ca, and we look forward to getting your feedback so we can continue to improve and enhance our future town halls. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. We had over 1,000 people on our Zoom webinar and over 400 people on YouTube. So we clearly have a number of people interested in the topic of conversation, and we will be letting you know about our plan for future town halls. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to President Lenton to have the last word.
Look, I just want to say that the broad range of questions that have been coming in really tells the other panelists and me about the importance of having these town halls, but also of trying to make sure that we're following up with each and every one of you and posting information where we're getting a lot of questions. And so we're really happy to continue to do these town halls. I do want to thank the panel, Lisa, Carol, Amir, Jeff, Lucy, and Mary Catherine, Jade for moderating. Just want to thank all of you for attending. I know that as we see these case counts, especially in Ontario, continuing to trend upwards again, and we continue to negotiate that very delicate balance between the tightening of public health restrictions at the same time while talking about reopening, it can be easy to start to wonder if things will ever kind of go back to some degree of normality. But I do believe that there are reasons to be optimistic, especially with the rollout of the vaccinations, with them gaining momentum, slowly, but gaining momentum. The federal government does remain confident that anyone in Canada who wants to be vaccinated will be able to be vaccinated no later than the end of September, but probably sooner, depending on recent estimates of supply. So we're going to continue to plan with that optimism, knowing that even though things will most likely look still different in the fall, that we remain committed to increasing opportunities for students to have in-person learning, but also to ensure that the community remains safe, energized, and welcoming to all. So thank you very much for dialing into this town hall, and thanks to everyone, and we'll be in touch soon. Keep those updates coming. Thanks so much. Merci, miigwech.